Welcome back to Travel Like an Ochang. Riddle me this. What are the top 10 concerns you should be aware of while planning to be a solo cruiser globally? Embarking on a solo cruise presents unique challenges, including concerns about safety, budgeting, social isolation, medical emergencies, cabin selection, communication, shore excursions, itinerary changes, and cultural barriers, which can be mitigated through careful planning and informed choices. More after this. Going on a solo cruise can be an exciting adventure but comes with unique concerns. Safety and security are top priorities, both on board and during shore excursions. Budgeting is crucial, especially with potential single supplements and unexpected expenses. Social isolation and dining alone can be challenging. Medical emergencies at sea or in foreign ports are significant worries, necessitating proper travel insurance. Choosing a suitable cabin and ensuring reliable communication with family and friends are also important. Shore excursion safety and itinerary changes due to weather or geopolitical events add to the stress. For solo travelers considering a cruise around the world, several concerns are particularly pertinent. Here are the top 10 concerns they might have. Safety and security.
As a solo traveler, one of the things that you really want to think about anytime you're doing any type of solo endeavor is your safety and security. Fortunately, on these modern cruise ships, safety really isn't a concern in terms of something that's going to outwardly happen to you. However, there are those instances where your private actions may cause some harm or injury to you if you're not conscious of your activities and what's happening around you. You always have to have a level of street smarts. Doesn't mean you have to be overly worried, but you certainly want to be aware of things that are happening around you. This extends not only for the ship, but it also extends out while you're out on your excursion. Especially in foreign countries, you want to make sure that you're adhering to very common sense things to keep yourself safe. Don't try to count out large amounts of money while out. Try to pay with a credit card whenever you can. Also, prior to leaving the ship, make sure you go to the front desk and exchange your money so you have some local currency and have a bunch of small bills, and that way you'll be able to tip or get small things, or you don't have to have your vendors make change for you. Because just be smart when you are taking out money and trying to make sure that you're safe while doing that. Another level of safety is the time of day. More and more cruises are spending longer periods in port. You could conceivably come back after dark. In those instances, try to travel with other people. If you're in a taxi cab while heading back to the ship, even if you're not making a call, pretend that you're talking on the phone with someone during that ride, so that the person transporting you always has this feeling or indication that someone is aware you have to be somewhere and that you're really not alone and that people expect you. And that'll help you be safe.
Solo travelers often worry about their personal safety, both on the ship and during shore excursions. This includes concerns about theft, personal attacks, or getting lost in unfamiliar places. Cost and budgeting.
After a certain point, it's subjective. You're gonna have some obvious costs like the cost of the cruise, the cost of your airfare, cost of your hotel, but there are a whole bunch of other variable costs that you need to consider. Drink packages, your spending allowance, your excursion budget. These excursions can be pretty expensive and you're unlikely to be able to afford an excursion in every port. So you want to consider getting your excursion from the cruise company or doing it based off of an onshore vendor. There are pros and cons to doing it either way. My preference is to do it with the cruise company. True, you're going to be paying more upfront, sometimes significantly more, but You do have the insurance of, if you do not make it back in time, wait for you. And if they can't wait for you, they will be the ones responsible to get you to that next port and put you up until then. So you don't get that type of insurance if you go, for example, outside the cruise, off the ship, and ask a local to take you on an excursion. Now, the pros of that is they're going to be significantly less, and you really got to weigh what the excursion is. If it's a type of excursion where you're going miles and miles away from the cruise port to be able to have that, I would shy away from it. But if it's going to to another resort 10 or 15 miles away, you could risk that, because you can easily catch a cab or some other means of transportation to get you back to the ship, so that you're not totally screwed if you're running on the late side. So with that, please just make that decision. Again, I vote for paying the higher price to the cruise company for those excursions, but you really have to do that based off of your own feeling. Also, set a budget for how much you want to spend on the ship. There are going to be tons of opportunities to buy things at the gift shops. So you want to have that in mind, because they're always going to try to sell you something. A great tip or a great hack is, don't buy anything for the first couple days. About halfway through the sailing, they're going to have these flash sales, especially if they hadn't sold a lot of stuff that first 1 or 2 days. And that's where you really get your best options in terms of alcohol, tobacco, all the other things that your t-shirts, tchotchkes, all of those things that you want to get. Wait until about the middle of the cruise, when you have a sea day, and you can really sit back and decide what you want to buy. The other dreaded thing that you'll have to deal with as a solo traveler, solo supplement penalty. And what that basically means is the cruise cabins are sold as two. So whether you're sailing as a solo traveler or you're sailing with at least one other person, you're going to be charged for double. Now, this changes in several instances. For example, if you're lucky enough to get one of the few solo cabins, then you're not going to have to pay that penalty. Although your ticket is going to be higher than if you divided a double cabin by two to see what that half price is. You're not paying half. So you will pay a little bit of upcharge, but it's not as high as paying 100% of the other of another passenger who's not there. The other benefit or the other thing to be cognizant about is, depending on your status with that particular cruise line. So I'm elite status in several cruise lines. The benefit of that is they have an automatically built-in supplement for your second sailor. So for example, they'll have something set up so that the first sailor pays 100%, but the second sailor pays only 60%. Whatever that deal is, it's going to be a discount based off of your loyalty status. So it's always good to make sure you maintain that. But that's another way to lower those costs.
Cruises can be expensive, and solo travelers might face additional charges like single supplements. Managing expenses for onboard activities, excursions, and unexpected costs is crucial. Social isolation.
You got to understand the nature of being a solo traveler. You're a solo traveler, so there's going to be some isolation. It's not going to be bad, especially if you're on a large cruise ship or a smaller cruise ship. There's society of people all around you. So don't be intimidated. Now, I can see it being a challenge in social events such as dining. Not a lot of people like to dine alone. You don't have to. You have a couple of options. For one, you can eat up at the buffet where there's a whole bunch of people. And the buffet food is pretty good. But if you want a more refined dining experience, you also have the option of going to going to a dining venue where you're seated with random people. The cruise line will do that all day for you. They'll sit you at a table that already have people, and then voila, you have the ability to have a social setting, social interaction. Or I actually prefer dining alone. There's just so much activity during the day. There's so many things going on. I really enjoy the fact that I have a moment to have a meal by myself. So I don't mind that. Although, if you look at some of my past videos, I do have some pretty particular rules about what has to happen at the table if I'm going to be a solo diner. If I'm eating alone, I don't want 2 place settings set. You know, the moment I sit down and they're aware that I'm a solo diner, please clear the other setting. I just hate that the optics of it looking like someone blew me off, no one's gonna come, you know, they were supposed to come to dinner and they didn't show up. So please get this right. And if they don't remove that other place setting, just ask them to do so, and it's no big thing. But yeah, that's my thing about the social isolation piece. There's really no opportunity to be socially isolated unless you make it that way. Get out of your shell, talk to people, and you will not feel socially isolated.
While cruising solo can be a great way to meet new people, it can also lead to feelings of loneliness, especially if one is introverted or finds it hard to connect with fellow passengers. Medical emergencies.
Now, a real significant one for me is a situation where you may have medical emergencies. Now, you can help mitigate this possibility, this risk, by making sure you have adequate travel insurance. I talk about that in other videos. Me, that's a required expense just as much as paying for the cruise. You definitely need to get yourself travel insurance. And they may think it's real expensive. And it's not. If you think about, only one incident, one accident could cost you thousands of dollars, especially if you need a medical evac, or you're in a facility that needs to hold you overnight, or you have to be airlifted somewhere or transported back home after spending some time in a local hospital. It's just not worth it. You don't want to have to go through the indignity of setting up a GoFundMe because you didn't plan ahead. So travel insurance is the best thing. The other thing is, don't rely on the ship's doctors. Not only are they limited as to what they can do for you, and mind you, if you have to go, but it's a very expensive proposition to go down there. I don't know if you've ever had to go down and just even get some simple medicines. It's really a problem. And it's, not a problem, but it's really expensive to use the ship's medical facilities. Also, there are no dentists on board. So if you have any types of issues with your mouth, dentures, bad tooth, or what have you, it's going to be an expensive visit to the doctors for them to basically give you ibuprofen and tell you that they can't do anything for you, to get it fixed once you get home or once you get to port. And again, that's going to be an expensive proposition. When you're thinking of emergencies, think of having proper coverage prior to you going on the cruise, and also understanding that wherever you're at, in a different country, in the United States, wherever you're at, there are going to be expenses for that local emergency facility, whether it be ambulatory or admittance to, or being released from any type of hospital on shore in any country. And on top of that, if they hold you for multiple hours, you may miss your cruise because the doctor's not willing to let you go. And part of that calculus is if you can pay. If you can't pay, you can't go. That's their rules. Yeah, you're gonna find yourself stuck. So one last plug for it: please get adequate travel insurance that has adequate medical, adequate trip interruption, and just proper coverage. And just taking the default insurance from the cruise that the cruise offer you doesn't necessarily work. They cover up to a certain point, and they may not cover your hospital expenses the way they should. So always look for a third-party provider.
The fear of falling ill or having a medical emergency while at sea or in a foreign country is significant. Access to quality medical care and travel insurance coverage are common concerns. Cabin location and type.
So thinking about your creature comforts while on the cruise is the choice of your cabin. Now, if you are a solo sailor and you are paying the solo sailor supplement, you basically have the run of the ship of where you potentially want to go. You want to think about things like proximity to elevators, or loud places or eating venues or any public walkways or any the locations where the crew needs to go to their spaces on the ship. So basically what I'm saying is, in choosing your cabin, the best strategy is to pick something that there's nothing below you. I'm talking about public spaces. There's nothing below you, above you, to the right or left of you. You don't really want to be way up front where the anchor is, because that's a pretty loud proposition. Also, where if you're sitting in the bow or the front of the boat, you're gonna be more prone to the movement of the waves, the ups and downs. The stabilizers are great, but if you're right up front, with the cabin right up front, you tend to feel that. You also get a lot of the noise from the anchor, and if you're higher up in the decks, you're going to get a lot of noise from the pool, or that it may cost you a little bit more to be moved more towards midship, but anywhere midship away from elevators is going to be the quietest option. Now, the downside of this is, although cruise companies are changing their design strategies on what cabins are available, the majority of the solo sailor cabins tend to be in areas with obstructed views, or in the bow, or in the stern, in the back. And the back is bad for many reasons. If you're near the engine room, or that's usually where the crew passages are, where they're bringing out their equipment. So it could be loud in those areas, or very busy at the very least. But families with small kids or even tweens tend to book that space during any time during your cruise. You're going to hear them running about, going up and down the halls, stomping, doing very young people type of noises that could could turn you off to that type of space. So just be very aware where you're booking, ask questions, and just generally, you may have to pay a little bit extra, but the peace of mind is well worth it. In saying that, you can also find some great bargains in that, because if you don't mind an obstructed view, if you don't mind the sound of an anchor, if you don't mind sitting, having a cabin next door to a public space, those tend to be cheaper cabins, and you may get a break with that. Another one more strategy I'll mention: whatever cabin you book may, if the cruise isn't sold out, so this isn't 100% of the time, but it has happened, you may have an opportunity to bid for a different room. Now, there is risk doing that as well, because you really don't have control over where they will put you, and you could be going from the frying pan into the fire, so to speak. If you had a nice location where you picked it, and then you opt to upgrade, they may put you in a less desirable location than what you actually had. So you do that with caution. Out of the 3 times I've done that, I've actually were successful twice.
Choosing the right cabin is important for comfort and safety. Solo travelers may worry about noise, proximity to common areas, and whether a single occupancy room is available. Shore excursions.
I touched upon this a little earlier, but let me focus in a little bit more on what happens during shore excursions. As a solo traveler, you'll want to just be aware of whatever it is you pick and the details of that. And if you feel uncomfortable at all, just don't do it. So for example, if you've opted to go at it alone in terms of your excursion, what you don't want to do is, if you get there are only like 3 people doing the excursion, I would scratch my head and say, you know what, maybe I won't do this one at this point, right? My whole philosophy is safety in numbers. So if you see a lot of people doing something, it's probably going to be a good option. Now, things like walking around the port, or taking a cab a few miles out to sit on a beach somewhere that's in a local area, I'm not talking about that. That feel free to do. But you got to use common sense, and this is just street smarts, that if you're going to sign up for something and there's not a lot of interest in it, and you don't see a lot of people doing it, just don't do it, or a junket on a fishing boat all day long and only 2 people sign up. I just wouldn't do that, right? So that's up to you based off of your preferences, but just be aware of your surroundings, and just make smart choices.
Participating in excursions alone can be daunting. Concerns include the safety of destinations, reliability of tour operators, and navigating language barriers. Connectivity and communication.
We live in a connected world. There's no doubt about it. So I know a lot of people give the advice, just turn off your phone. Now, I do advise you to put your phone in airplane mode while you're not in the United States. Just period, point blank, just do it, because you will get hit with roaming charges on the high seas that could be several of hundreds, if not thousands of dollars worth of charges. So just do that. But I also acknowledge that you want to stay connected. You want to deal with sending pictures or getting updates or so forth and so on. And now we move into this other optional expense, is should you get a data plan. Now, I wouldn't advocate just getting a flat out data plan throughout the entire cruise. The reality is you kind of need these plans only when you're not at shore. Certainly when you pull into port, there's going to be a coffee shop or there's going to be a public Wi-Fi, although you want to make sure you have a virtual VPN for privacy, ... right? Always, that's kind of the thing you say. But if you're not a tech geek, you want, at the very least, you want free public Wi-Fi when you can hop on and get your updates. And that's relatively cheap, if not free. So that's a better strategy. And if you have 2 sea days, let's say, for example, the second sea day, you want to buy access for the day, do that. That way you can get caught up, send whatever it is you need to send back and forth to family and friends, and then get back to your vacation and stay, quote unquote, disconnected. I would say that is a better strategy. Now, for someone like myself, because I'm a vlogger, I really need access all the time, because I'm doing videos, I'm uploading, I'm downloading, I'm trying to get the word out to as many people as possible. I tend to get the internet package, and fortunately, because of the Starlink, which is not every cruise line, it's on some, but it is rolling out to many more. Starlink actually gets you a better connection and is more cost effective than some of the systems that are currently out there now. So if you have that option to be able to sign up for like a Starlink account, go ahead and do that. Other than that, I wouldn't worry too much about this connectivity thing. And when you're in port, you can just make your connections. Also, certain phone companies have policies that allow you to get free access in certain countries. So for example, I'm a Verizon user, and Verizon has a deal with Mexico and Canada, so that wherever I'm in those ports, I get free calling as if I were in the United States. Now you got to be careful as you're going into that port. Don't turn your phone on thinking, oh, I'm about to move into Mexico, I'm going to have free, because you're dealing with the international satellites. When you're in port and the boat is tied to the dock, then you're hitting the local towers, and then it's safe to use your phone if you're going to make a call. But the only way to understand that fully is to contact your carrier, let them know where you're going, and see if you have that type of service. But it's a great service to have, especially if you do a lot of the Caribbean ports.
Staying connected with family and friends is important for solo travelers. Issues like unreliable internet service and high roaming charges can be a major concern. Dining alone.
Dining alone is part of that social isolation, but it's also just to bring it front and center. A lot of people just don't feel comfortable being alone. One of the great liberating factors of being a solo traveler is you don't have that hang up. At least most don't. And part of this whole adventure of getting out there and challenging yourself and trying to see what's going on is that you want to make sure that you feel comfortable being alone. That doesn't mean you're lonely. It just means there are going to be times where you're doing things on your own. Feel comfortable doing that. I'm a strong advocate for getting out there all over the world, just making friends and talking to people. And then when I need to, I have my private space to curl up in. As I mentioned earlier, dinner is one of those areas where I like to regroup and ground myself. But I don't just do that all the time. Sometimes I'll ask the maitre d' to sit me at a table with people so I can just interact and have some fun. It's easy for me to get into conversations. I have no problem doing that, and that works for me. So you got to make a decision yourself if you're that type of person, or are you going to be really broken up that you don't have someone else to sit across from you as you dine. And that can easily be rectified, and I've mentioned some of those strategies earlier, so just keep that in mind. You should not feel socially awkward or alone whenever you're in public spaces, or even when you're by yourself, because you're never really by yourself. You got a whole cruising community around you to support you. So just get out there and try to make friends. Another area that I love to interact in and make friends is at the hot tub. That's famously where I get into the best conversations, meet the most people, and it's just interesting. You could go in, sit there, just listen, and then people will draw you into their conversations, and before you know it, you have friends for life. Many of the people who watch this channel are people that I met in the hot tub on various cruises. Shout out to all of those folks, because I miss you and I can't wait to get on another cruise to catch back up with you. So happy cruising and keep it up, and yeah, that's what I say about that.
Many solo travelers worry about dining alone in a setting where meals are often social events. This can be awkward and may impact their overall enjoyment of the cruise. Itinerary changes.
Just like the weather, things change, and you got to be resilient. You can't get all broken up because a certain port is missed or something happens where you're gonna not get to where you're supposed to go. I have one interesting cruise where I was fortunate enough to be able to get on a Royal Caribbean cruise going down to Cuba. Well, anyway, we were in Cuba and we were having a great time, and then we got all back on the boat call because there was a hurricane coming. So got off, they got cleared through customs, but took forever. We just started on our excursions, then we got the word that we had to get back to the ship to get boot out of the harbor because there was a hurricane on its way. It wasn't that bad. They got to go to Hemingway's house and eat at some pretty nice restaurant. So it happened later in the day, but it did happen where we were all pulled back to the boat. And I just remember the adventure of, as we're pulling out, seeing the sky behind me gray and seeing this hurricane move in, and we're just beating it like a bat out of hell with other cruise ships doing the same, trying to get away from the island. It was just like an adventure story. So we're like looking behind, I go to the stern of the boat, look behind me, see all the inclement weather, see us moving forward. At some points we were caught in some rain, and other points we cleared the rain, and then finally there was a period where it was just sunny and hot, and everyone just sipping on a drink of choice because we beat the hurricane. So you can make some fun out of it. It was scary. Don't worry, no one got hurt. It was like a category 1, a category 2. That's dangerous enough, but they're used to that down in Cuba, so there was really minimal damage, but it was quite an adventure for the change. The reason I tell that story is things change, right? So the original itinerary said we were going to be there the entire day. In fact, it was one of those late night departures because Cuba was one of those places that you don't get to go a lot, so it wasn't your typical get there at 7 and you're out by 4 or what have you. We were actually supposed to stay till about midnight and then leave. We just left a little bit earlier, and I didn't care. Another example of changes that you may not be comfortable with, but it just happens, is you hear a lot. This hasn't happened to me, but you've heard in the news lately where boats are out, there's political unrest in a situation, and you have to change ports. Things change, and you have to be reasonable about those changes. The cruise lines have your best interests in mind. They're not going to put you in harm's way. And if they have to make a change, they have to make a change. Now, I know a lot of people try to take advantage of that and demand things like their money back, or you said you were going to go somewhere. I want to remind people, read your contract. The cruise lines absolutely have a right to change itinerary based off their own internal criteria, and you sign up for that. Now, I've seen in the past, cruise companies have been pretty fair about that. They don't just exercise that right and say, too bad, you're sad. They'll work with you, and whether it be onboard credits or percentage of of your next cruise, they'll give back, to even giving you back some money. But it really is at the discretion of the cruise line. So don't go in demanding anything. Just be very humble about it, make your request, and just using a little decorum, you may be able to turn this lemon into some lemonade. I want to work with the cruise companies to see what they can do. And if they can't do anything, I'm okay with that because I've already had a great vacation. That's my philosophy. I know a lot of people will differ with me on that, and that's part of being a solo traveler too, is this adaptability. One of my earlier cruises, I told you about a horrific time traveling to China to get on my cruise based out of China. However, it turned out to be one of the best cruises of my life because I got through all of that stuff leading up to the cruise, but then the cruise was absolutely great. So it was a silver lining, even though there were trials and tribulations to get me there. So with that, just pack your patience, put on a smile, and get out there.
Weather conditions or geopolitical events can lead to itinerary changes, which can be more stressful for solo travelers who have meticulously planned their trips. Language and cultural barriers.
This is where you want to be a citizen of the globe, right? So if I'm going to a foreign country, it's not incumbent on them to facilitate my visit. It's on me to understand that I'm in their home and what can I do to help make them feel more comfortable. You do want to try to communicate, even just as simple as learning a few phrases, especially like thank you, bathroom, just stuff like that. You don't have to go crazy with it, but you do want to make sure that you have your basics, and in the areas that you need help, just be humble about it, and most people, regardless of what language they speak, are willing to help. So that's the message I leave for this whole thing about language barriers and cultural differences. For the cultural part of it, please, as Americans, we have certain rights in our country, but we go places where we're not in America. Don't bring those attitudes there. So, and I talk about something as basic as not wearing shirts, bikinis, just wearing political clothes on t-shirts or pants or what have you. Or if you're in a certain public place, wearing flip-flops. A lot of places in Asia, especially Thailand and Vietnam, you can't just go walking into their temples with shoes on. Don't argue. Either stay on the ship that day and don't do a short excursion, or simply just honor the local customs and traditions and be a resident of the world and just try to learn something. And part of learning is understanding what those norms are and capitulating to them. It's just understanding and just being reasonable about what you're doing and how to travel and the things you need to do to be successful in that space.
Navigating foreign languages and unfamiliar cultural norms can be challenging for solo travelers, impacting their comfort and confidence while traveling.
Those are the 10 things that I feel as a solo traveler you need to understand before embarking on this journey. And I hope the information was useful to you, and I hope that I run into you during your travels across the world. And until next time.
Lastly, navigating language and cultural barriers can impact the overall travel experience. Careful planning and informed choices can help mitigate these concerns for a more enjoyable solo cruise. Addressing these concerns through careful planning, choosing the right cruise line, and making use of available resources can help solo travelers
And until next time. And until next time. And until next time. Okay. I'd much rather be on a ship right now. Remember to like and subscribe and click that bell